Chapter 1 New World, 18+. You are listening at FameTV.info. Naruto stepped off the boat and onto solid land for the first time in almost a year. His Sunday-kissed hair waved in the wind. He took the sight of the new continent in. It was rather primitive. Buildings were made mainly of wood, including the port he was now standing on. Then again, it was understandable, this is a port. Town after all. Heck, most of the buildings in Wave Country were built from wood. Only a few were made from brick and concrete. This continent, it has several signatures beyond Kage level, a deep, guttural voice commented. Can you direct me to them? Naruto thought, referring to the voice snorted, though it sounded more like a snarl. The closest one is to the west. Dead ahead, in case you don't know your directions. A small pause, though there is a faint, but the strong signature on the outskirts of this backwater village. How strong are we talking here? Naruto asked as he stepped off the dock and onto the dirt ground. If I were to put it in words you can comprehend. Borderline Kage level, the voice growled in irritation, but like I said before. I can barely detect it. Whoever owns this power. I can't tell if they're any stronger or not. It's almost as if they're disappearing. In that case, if I run into this person. We'll see if they're stronger than they're making themselves out to be. He rolled his shoulders and walked further into the port. Town. As one would expect from such a location, it was bustling with locals milling about, bartering or chatting in the bazaar. Their attire was rather foreign to Naruto. Mostly linen tunics and trousers or long dresses of assorted colors. If he wanted to blend in as much as possible, then he's going to need to get a change of clothes. Unfortunately, he had no such money on him. And he was pretty sure using Kage Bushin would be a bad idea. He didn't know how these people would react to seeing multiple hims appearing out of nowhere, and something told him referring his jutsu as magic to these people wouldn't go so well either. Maybe he could pop a henge in a nearby alley, or something. Decisions, you know, maybe instead of wondering how you're going to make those damned clones of yours, maybe you should think on how Tio gets some damned money, the voice said, starting calm at the beginning before the pitch rose in the middle until he was outright shouting at the end. I know, Naruto replied nonchalantly. I don't want to scare them off, though. I'll ask around, the voice interrupted with a scoff. Bah! Idiot! Did you honestly forget I am an empath? I can detect malicious intent no matter where you are. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head. You forgot, didn't you? The voice deadpanned. He was about to respond, but the voice cut him off before he could say what he intended to say. Never mind. What's more, there's a group of people with malicious intent a few miles away. To the north, in case you're wondering. How malicious are we talking here? Malicious enough to make me want to go and kill them. Naruto suddenly turned serious. I see. I better get that out of the way, then. Anything to make the feared Kyuubi want to go and outright murder someone. It was serious business. To the north, right? Yes. All right. Then let's do this. If nothing else, he could loot the corpses after he's done and see if they had anything of value on their person. With that, he was off. A while later, the malicious intent the Kyuubi felt had led Naruto into a flat plain with a lot of shrubberies. The young man was hiding within one, peering through the leaves and twigs as he took in the sight before him. A massive campsite. How many people can you detect in there? Just under 20. You can take them. Kurama, under 20 is too small a number for a camp this big. Did you miss anything? Let me check again. There was a brief pause. Don't know how I missed that. 2 groups are heading this way. They must have sent them out to scout, probably to pick a potential target to raid. Unless they already did the raiding. If that's the case, then you'd better get ready for a fight. Smirking, Naruto brought his fingers into a cross sign and yelled, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Then, there was a massive plume of smoke. Just as the camp's occupants looked up to see what the fuck that was, it started raining men. With glowing orbs in hand. Wait. What? The first Naruto landed directly in the middle of the encampment, slamming the orb into the ground with a yell of Rasengan, and the ground crumbled, then exploded upwards into a mushroom cloud of dirt and smoke. Then 1 became 2. Then 2 became 3. And 3 became 4 and 5, which quickly turned into hundreds of Narutos throwing themselves into the fray. A huge dome of blue and white expanded out of the cloud. It wasn't all bad though. Before the dome grew massive, several clones jumped out of the mushroom cloud carrying several trinkets, bags of money, and other goods. And luckily there were no prisoners in the encampment. It was over in an instant. There was no way someone didn't notice the large mushroom cloud that simply appeared or the massive explosion moments before. That said, Naruto felt it wise to grab the ill-gotten goods, duck into the tree line, and see if anyone came to investigate. Pa. It looks like the two groups are going the other way now, Kurama spat not a moment later. Really? Naruto asked aloud. This time he didn't see the point in talking mentally to the chakra being, because no one was around. Kurama snorted with distaste. Yes. They turned their tails and ran. Most likely because of your destructive show there. You do realize once these meatbags get their nerves together, they are going to come and investigate this, right? We'll be long gone by then, Naruto pointed out as he sealed the trinkets and gold bags away. Well, excluding one bag. He needed to make sure to have one on hand at all times. It's not like this continent is going to have people capable of tracking me. Idiot, roared Kurama, this continent has Kage-level beings here. While they're not on the same level as magnificent beings such as I, they can and will give you trouble if you're not smart enough to look after yourself. As loath as I am to admit it, I have been defeated twice by Kage-level individuals. Damn that Hashirama, and damn that Minato. While he may respect them as shinobi for their strength, and in the case of the latter his sacrifice, he disliked the fact he was beaten by lowly humans. As for Madara, he did not count. He would never count. His damn Sharingan did the work for him. I'll take your advice into consideration, Naruto said, a thoughtful look on his face, Kurama reminding him of that. He guessed even the most powerful beings in the world can be defeated by someone weaker than them if they're not careful. With everything sealed away and attached to his trousers, Naruto went back to the port town he came from, to get a change of clothing and buy something to eat. 2 weeks later, wandering the new continent was an adventure in itself. Naruto could count on one hand the number of times he had either been attacked, or ambushed by these non-humans. Purple or gray skin, extendable limbs, glowing golden eyes and the like. Hell, just a few days ago, he met a literal snake lady in a nearby forest who had issues. She was nothing short of insane, kinda like a cross between Anko and Gaara, only. Well, somehow worse. And after defeating her, and getting her to calm the fuck down, Naruto got to know her on a personal level. That was when he had learned a lot of shit had happened to her. Then, she had a mental breakdown over her appearance. Apparently, she didn't know she was, whatever she was. He helped her come to terms with herself. After that was over and done with, she got a promise out of him. To kill this one-horned monster, who apparently was like her. Only stronger. She was off hunting down some bandits he'd spotted earlier, while he went to deal with this yoki he'd been searching for. The girl had to eat human entrails, apparently. Suffice to say, the elemental nations, despite it being in a constant state of conflict and cold wars, was better off than this nameless continent. Also, everyone here called the island this world. Completely unaware of other lands across the sea. They weren't all that creative in the naming. Then again, neither were the people back home, elemental nations. Would that make him an elemental or something, then? Or a fire elemental, since he came from the land of fire? It wouldn't make sense. At all. Questioning the intelligence of his homeland aside, Naruto decided to get back to the task at hand. Discovering whom this energy signature in the west belonged to, from the map he bought a week ago, Naruto learned the name of the region he was in right now. Lautrec, a region full of green valleys, mountains and a desert. Well, right now he was in such a valley with a castle built into a mountain ahead of him. The source of energy he'd been tracking was inside of that castle, he realized. Along with another 4. One, in particular, was respectably huge. While not as big as the one he'd been tracking, it still dwarfed the other 3 by a large margin. He picked up the pace, and as he approached the castle he found many corpses lying on the ground, dismembered, disemboweled or otherwise torn asunder. It was like Kura-bii had stormed through these halls, swords drawn, and decimated everything in his path. Naruto double-timed it over there. The path to the castle was pretty straightforward. There were no traps, no lookouts, nothing that would give away his approach. It was too easy. Far too easy for comfort. When he got to the entrance, he paused. That's a lot of rods, the blonde muttered in astonishment. There had to be at least 100 of them fixed in the ground, on the walls, and even on the ceiling. As he walked inside the hall, Naruto saw the rods were tall enough to reach his hip, though he couldn't be too sure on that. They were deeply fixed in the ground, after all, so they were probably longer than they seemed. He stopped beside one and put a hand on it. It was weird, it felt almost organic but had a metallic feel at the same time. Kurama, what are the chances of there being some kind of alarm system? Naruto questioned his titan-sized resident. Highly unlikely as far as I know, the chakra construct replied, but be careful in the off chance they are. You never know. While these signatures are definitely not chakra, it is possible you were detected by their owners and are expected. What makes you so sure we may have been discovered? We were tracking them despite their inability to use chakra. It is possible they are able to do the same. A two-way exchange, if you will. Taking that into account, they may be able to detect you but didn't know if you were approaching or not. These rods may have given your presence away to them the moment you entered the castle, or if they are able to spread their influence out, you were discovered long before you got within the castle limits. Hypothetically. Kurama explained, deduced and reasoned. In other words, there was no point in trying to keep me as incognito as possible, he asked, as he took his hand off the rod and walked further into the castle. You wanted an answer, I gave you a hypothetical one. A possibility. Since this is all hypothetical, it may be true, this way you won't be surprised if they knew you were already coming. All right. Thanks for the advice, Kurama. Heh. You're a welcome brat. Just then, there was a loud crash followed by a rumble, as a massive dust cloud flooded the hall from further down. Wasn't expecting that. What happened? Kurama reached out with his senses to see what was going on in that direction. The owners of 2 signatures are fighting whomever that second largest one belongs to, he explained. Though, fighting is a loose way to put it. One of them seems injured, while the other is toying with their opponent, despite being significantly weaker. It's quite impressive. You think it's one of these silver-eyed witches we've heard so much about? Maybe. If it is, let's hope they're sexier than that makes them sound. Naruto shrugged and quietly headed in their direction. He could feel several tremors coming from up ahead, now. Apparently, the fight was a bit more spectacular than anything he'd seen on this island, so far. Very interesting. Moments later, he reached the anticipated pile of rubble. Apparently, this was where the cave-in happened. He put his hand on it with a frown, to see if he could move it or not. He couldn't, not without using chakra at least. Sighing, he withdrew said limb and asked, they're on the other side of this, I'm guessing. Yup. What's happening, now? The injured one bolted off downstairs, Kurama replied. That one can heal themselves. The other 2 are duking it out, oh. There's our target. That one's just sitting around, though, possibly watching the fight. If they are, then they're not much of a team player. Probably not. Naruto frowned again but shrugged. Out the corner of his eye, he saw one of those rods embedded right next to him. He then grabbed a hold of it and gave it an experimental tug. It was in there good. I just noticed that those rods have the same energy signature as the second. Big guy. From what I can tell, it's not too deep either. Pretty sure you could pull it out if you tried. Well, if he was going into a fight, might as well have something to keep them at bay with. Time to drop the stealth, then, Naruto muttered, knowing he couldn't get through the rubble without drawing attention. Forming a Rasengan in one hand, and yanking the rod out with his other, Naruto eyeballed the rubble before him. Meanwhile, on the other side, a brown-haired girl in a pink sundress found herself distracted from the fight, as she sensed something big coming their way, something interesting. It was quite entrancing, whatever it was. Then, there was a massive explosion as literal tons of dirt and rubble was launched from the makeshift wall that her lover had created. This was immediately followed by a male shout of "incoming" and one of the said lover's rods being launched forth. Ow! That hurt. Who did that? Your mother. Emerging from the rubble, Naruto smirked at the giant, blue monstrosity he'd just beamed. He was big, he was ugly, and he looked to be encased in some kind of carapace-like armor. He was humanoid, but hunched over in a semi-quadrupedal stance and missing a hand. Off to one side was a brunette with honey-colored eyes, sporting a light pink sundress and giving Naruto an almost lustful gaze. To another, a blonde with silver eyes were pinned to the ground, impaled by one of the blue guy's rods. She was dressed in a white cloth tunic and trousers with apparently steel spaulders, vambraces, sabatons and a fold. Poor thing. She was pretty cute, too. Had she been wearing a breastplate, this woman would have presumably been less likely to end up in her predicament. Oh, well. Not much he could do, now. Ha. So these silver-eyed witches apparently aren't as ugly as that name would have you believe, Naruto muttered. Then he vanished from sight, as a massive hand slammed into the ground where he once stood. One could practically see the question mark over Doff's head, as he looked about in befuddlement. Hey! Where'd you go? Up your ass and around the corner. The shout came from above, as Naruto dropped down from the ceiling, as well as another Naruto, and another. All three had a strange, blue orb in each hand, which they then slammed into the giant man's back. Meanwhile, still on her little perch, Riefel could feel her cheeks burning, as she stared at this man in awe. Oh, my, she thought, I never would have expected this. Doff wailed in agony, as an explosion of purple gore was expelled from his back. Damn you! That hurt. Just as he landed, mildly annoyed that his attack didn't do nearly as much as it should have, Naruto swore he heard the impaled woman cough out, "About time you showed up." Then, from the ground, another blonde with short hair and silver eyes shot up from the stone floor with a sword in hand and garbed in naught but a leather cape. This woman was younger looking, though not by much, with the eyes of a seasoned veteran. She was also utterly pissed. Naruto couldn't help but ogle her out the corner of his eye. Right on this woman's heels, another one with slightly longer blonde hair and the same eye color hopped to her side. She was garbed in mostly brown and gray. Her clothing was thick and she was lightly armored and armed with a near-identical, two-handed sword. The only difference was the symbol near the base of its blade. Seeing as how there was a giant, blue monster guy trying to kill him, however, Naruto didn't have time to enjoy the eye candy. Surprising both of the newcomers, he jumped right back into the fray. Then, just as Doff threw a punch at him, every woman in the room nearly jumped out of their skin, as he caught the massive fist with his bare hand. Then, his eyes went red and he was encased in a crimson, bubbly veil of demonic energy, as he did the seemingly impossible, throwing his utterly massive opponent across the hallway, through the wall and out the castle with a mighty roar. The crimson cloak around Naruto then slowly dispersed with a low hiss and his eyes turned back to their normal blue. Ha! I thought he would be heavier than that, he snorted, and under the silver and honey-colored eyes he casually walked over to the hole, acting as if he hadn't thrown someone 20 times his damn size clear through the castle. Might as well finishing him off before he gets back up. Galatea stared at the back of this strange and strong, young man from where she lay. She looked at the rod in her abdomen and hissed when she grabbed and pulled it out. Jean and Claire had no idea how to react, merely staring at Naruto, while Riefel openly drooled at the spectacle she'd just witnessed. "Close your mouth. Otherwise, flies will get in," Naruto told her. Without looking, the brunette snapped her mouth shut with an audible click. She also wiped off the drool from the corner of her mouth upon noticing it and blushed. That wasn't very lady-like, though she wasn't one to usually care. She could make an exception this time. That strength of his was simply breathtaking. It was more impressive to her that he had done it without transforming. That showed more than enough, that he was a lot stronger than he looked. She simply had to have him. When he reached the hole under the eyes of Galatea, Riefel, Claire and Jean, the young man stopped and squinted, searching for Doff, before stepping outside. Naruto brought his hand up, a Rasengan forming in his palm. It formed completely, then expanded outwards and upwards, making Naruto raise his hand above his head. For sharp, white edges formed around it like a shuriken as a loud screech sounded through the great hall. All four women marveled at the sight, having never seen anything of the like. Then, the blonde threw his conjured weapon at Doff, who futilely tried to block it with his forearms. The technique cleaved through him like a hot knife through butter. He didn't even have time to scream, as he was chopped to bits in one fell swoop, falling to the ground in a series of wet plops. Then, to add insult to injury, the Rasen shuriken expanded outwards and upwards, engulfing Doff within the dome where he was subjected to billions and billions of tiny microscopic blades, tearing into his body on a cellular level. By the time the dome dwindled, there was nothing left of him. Not even his purple blood. All that was left in the wake of the Rasen shuriken was a massive crater. Oh my! Galatea was on edge, but at the same time, she was impressed. Never before had she seen such a display of power. What an awe-inspiring technique. Jean was silent. The Rasen shuriken shook her to the core. Just what on earth was that? It was immense. She had never seen anything like it. She thought she had seen everything this world had to offer. Not, if only he came sooner, then her party would still be alive. That amazing technique, that power. She started rubbing her thighs together in arousal, which went unseen by the others, unknown to her, though. A certain fox let out a knowing chuckle. "There's nothing left of him." A stunned Claire murmured. Her silver eyes slowly looked away from the crater to Naruto, whose back was still to them. She subconsciously licked her lips with hidden want in her eyes. That amount of energy was attractive. Arousing, even. Like Jean, she too started rubbing her thighs together in arousal. Riefel couldn't help but drool, again. This man was going to be hers if she had to make him her bitch. Shuddering in glee at the thought of such a powerful mate, the brunette then started to saunter on up to this fine, young specimen of manliness. "Done and done," Naruto said, brushing off his hands as if removing dust. Then he felt someone tap him on the shoulder. Blinking, he turned to look over his shoulder, only to be surprised when Riefel takes hold of his cheeks and slam her lips onto his. Caught by surprise, Naruto turned around completely but put up zero resistance, as the young-looking girl before him quickly escalated the lip lock. Sliding her tongue into his mouth, before he could react, and snaking her arms around his neck. She was on her tiptoes, so she was almost leveled with him, rubbing her small chest against his and lewdly moaning into his mouth. Then, she bent her knees to pull him down on top of her, wrapping a leg around his hip to get the point across. Naruto grunted into her mouth as he fell on top of her. But once he recovered, he finally returned the lip lock with great a ferocity that she enjoyed. Riefel giggled, clashing her tongue against his as she rubbed her crotch against him. Then, she slid her hands down and tugged at his clothing, visibly trying to strip him, right then and there. "I'm out of here." Kurama groaned, finding the thought of napping to be more appealing than watching his host copulating with this human. Galatea eyeballed the spectacle with nary a shred of amusement. Well, that escalated quickly. She mused, while it was their duty to kill any Yoma, and awaken they encounter, there was no way she was going to interrupt their fun time. The man who just killed Doph as if it were nothing wouldn't take too kindly to that, and the fact an abyssal one was, well, doing this to him was nothing short shocking. She was curious, morbidly so, to see if Riefel was doing what she thought she was going to do. So far, that appeared to be the case. Jean's eye twitched as she glared at the little bitch. How dare she? How fucking dare she just spread her legs like a common whore, right in front of them? That man was Jean's to claim, not, wait. Said blonde turned beet red, realizing what she was thinking. Claire was wide-eyed but otherwise stoic. She was pissed but did very well in hiding it. The blonde in question didn't know why, but a part of her, a small, rebellious side of her, wanted to march over there, and punt that hussy into the next village. Claire blinked. Where the hell did that come from? Paying their audience no mind, the abyssal loli wasted no time. She wanted this man, now. Fumbling about with his trousers, she managed to extract her prize, stroking his impressive girth. Upon discovering its sheer size, she was utterly lost. Nothing and no one was going to stop her. Now, the instant she saw what this man was packing, Jean went lightheaded. Holy shit. Were they even supposed to get that big? The damn thing might as well have been the third leg. 2 inches thick, and 15 inches long. All 4 women suddenly felt uncomfortably warm in an area long since forgotten. Riefel was the only exception, of course, but Jean, Galatea, and even the much younger Claire all had countless years of unattended urges rearing their ugly heads at the moment. Galatea and Claire could both feel their garments getting uncomfortably moist, as their juices started running down their legs. Naruto pushed his pint-sized partner's legs back by the knees and she guided him to her entrance, showing him that she wasn't wearing anything underneath. Naughty girl, he chuckled, as he closed his eyes and slowly started to push. Once the head poked its way inside his new fuck buddy, he scooted closer, so he could go in deeper. Then, he started pushing. Again, Riefel blushed at the comment, before letting out a guttural moan at the feel of his tip parting her folds and stretching her small body to degrees it simply wasn't meant to reach. But she enjoyed the feeling of it stretching her out impossibly far. Slowly but surely, he slid into her little by precious little. Then, she wailed like a whore as he grabbed her hips and started pulling her crotch towards his. How long had it been? How many times did she die and go to heaven, before he bottomed out, filling her to capacity and beyond? She didn't care. Riefel's mind was utterly gone, the instant her outer folds met his base. Her eyes rolled back, her tongue lolled out, and her toes curled, all before he even started fucking her. Slowly, Naruto pulled back, shuddering at the feel of this girl's tight inner walls sliding against his dick, before pulling her hips to his once more with a loud thud. Poor Riefel came right then and there. Her earth-shattering squeal pierced the heavens as her juices gushed forth and coated his lap. One thrust, that's all it took. She would never live that down. Jean's knees buckled at the sight. A painful longing ripped through her, as Naruto withdrew again, and slammed back into his thrashing partner. The sight, the smell, the sound. It was unbearable. Every thud, every strike to that girl's cervix, sent a shiver up the essentially naked woman's spine. Claire and Galatea were not faring any better. It was so hot. Why were so hot? It wasn't summer, yet. Unable to bear the heat, they started shedding their clothes and armor, bit by bit, unable to take their eyes off the graphic spectacle before them. Naruto, however, was not known for his ability to relent. He kept slamming into Riefel, his pace picking up slowly. Riefel would never be the same again after this. Not even 10 thrusts in, and she was already nearing her next orgasm. She couldn't take much more of it. How was he doing this to her? Riefel squealed, again, moaning lewdly, as her dripping folds made even more vulgar sounds from being so thoroughly violated. Sure enough, Naruto's pace picked up, leaving his partner in a state of constant orgasm, as the sound of flesh on flesh and the lewd slurping of this deceptively small woman's cooch echoed throughout the castle and surrounding woods. Still, he pounded her without mercy. Slamming as deep as he would go and at inhuman speeds, now, Naruto could feel refills constantly. Fluttering inner walls taking their toll on him. Would he be able to pull out? No, he couldn't, and he knew it. Her vice-like grip upon him made it all but impossible. He was out of breath, his balls ached for release. He needed it so badly. I hope you don't mind what I'm about to do, he rasped. I can't hold back. With that last word, Naruto slammed into refill once more, pulling her towards him to go as deep as he could reach, as he blew every last drop he had into the first piece of nice as he'd had in over a year. With every spurt came a thrust, ensuring it went as far in as possible, subconsciously trying his damnedest to make sure she conceived. With every thrust came a gasp from the still catatonic lowly. With every gasp, their spectators only became twice as horny. Soon, a small bulge started forming. Refill's little womb stretched to accommodate the most impossibly gargantuan load she'd ever experienced. Naruto panted heavily. Damn, that felt good. He looked the still recovering abyssal one beneath him in the eye and leaned down, pulling her into a deep, loving kiss. Poor Claire was flat on her ass. Her world was spinning and she tried to blink the white fog from her eyes. The instant she saw Naruto blow his load inside that girl, she passed out. No. It didn't feel like she did. She shook her head to try and clear the fog, the ringing in her ears, as she tried to ignore that she was sitting in a puddle of her juices. Jean was no better. She came a long time ago, though she would never admit it. She was out of breath and her legs were still wobbly. She could do nothing but sit there on her hands and knees. Finally, Galatea was beet red from the roots of her hair down to her fucking toes. How the hell was she so turned on by that? Jean couldn't take this anymore. Her rational side took the back seat as decades repressed sexual urges took the forefront. Naruto didn't have time to react and the short-haired woman threw herself at him, throwing him flat on his ass and straddling him. He let out a grunt of discomfort when she took hold of his shoulders and shoved him down, the back of his head smacking against the ground. He'd taken worse hits than that, so it wasn't too bad. But, then, his discomfort was forgotten, when the blonde atop him started grinding her folds against his shaft. Now that he got a better look at her, he saw there was a massive scar from her neck to her mons. Pubis. It was crudely stitched up, too. Naruto frowned, and decided to do something about it. When the man she wanted frowned, Jean suddenly felt nervous, averting her gaze. She didn't resist when he took her cloak off, though it did make her more self-conscious than she was used to. But, then, she felt a warm tingling upon her neck, right where her stigma started. There was a faint, red glow, as well. She couldn't help but look, and then, she couldn't believe her eyes. The man's hand glowed with that bubbly crimson aura from before, as he dragged it down her scar, only for it to utterly vanish in his wake. Once Naruto was half-way down, she felt the area he'd already covered, just to make sure her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. The skin was soft and flawless, the only proof that her stigma had ever existed being a faint tingle. Once it was entirely gone, Jean looked down, her lip quivering, her eyes welling up. Then, she kissed him with more vigor than even she thought possible. Tears of joy streamed down her face and her primal desires to mate with this man, to make him hers, only returned with 10 times the force. She placed a hand on his whiskered cheek, a look of unadulterated gratitude and love, of all things, smoldered in her silver eyes. She blushed, realizing that she didn't know his name. I'm Jean, she introduced nervously. May I please know your name? Naruto, the man obliged happily. Naru, too. Jean repeated. It was an odd name, but certainly memorable. I can't thank you enough. There went the waterworks, again. Please, she begged. Do whatever you want to me. Use me to your heart's desire. I implore to you. Not one to turn down a sexy lady's wishes, Naruto chuckled and pulled her down into a deep, loving kiss. He rubbed her back and groped her rear, as she returned the affection. Sliding her tongue into his mouth with both hands on his cheeks, Claire and Galatea were both sweating bullets. What the hell could this Naruto have done to make Jean of all people act like that? Either way, he was making out with one of them. The fact that he was willing to do so when no other man would even consider touching them, only encouraged the girls to hop on the instant they got the chance. Naruto then reached around and started rubbing Jean's wet slit from behind, eliciting a longing whimper from the woman. She was utterly soaked. They could skip the foreplay with a devious smirk. Naruto guided his already rock-hard shaft to Jean's lower lips and rubbed the tip against her. The woman jolted as a result with a yelp. I doubt it's my first time, she cautioned, blushing hard at the realization that she admitted it. Naruto's eyes shot wide open and then, he gave her yet another devilish grin. The thought of popping this chick's cherry was one he simply couldn't resist. So as not to hurt her, though, he slid in gently. Jean bit her lip, feeling his tip slowly part her folds with a wet squish. Just as he had with Refill, he inserted himself into her at an agonizingly slow, gentle pace. He then paused briefly to bend his knees and put his hands on her hips for better leverage and stability. Once he did, Naruto started sliding into her just a hair more quickly. Jean wailed in both pleasure and discomfort, as the first man she'd ever touched in such a way stretched her wide and deep. Damn, he felt so huge. Would he even fit? She didn't know for sure, but if he could fuck Refill the way he did without killing her, then Jean would be fine, right? After what felt like an eternity, the blonde finally felt Naruto's balls touch her rear and his tip poke at her cervix. She groaned in a mix of pain and pleasure. Let me know when I can start moving, the man whispered, a caring look in his eye. Jean felt the most devastating, horrific pang of longing she'd ever experienced rip through every fiber of her being. This man cared about her. They'd just met not even 30 minutes ago. She threw herself at him like a common whore, twice, and he legitimately cared. She had no idea how to react. The last people to even give her the time of day were her deceased parents. Jean's eyes rolled back as she started lifting herself, before slamming back down, leaving herself cross-eyed. She panted heavily and did it again, and again, and again. Taking the hint, Naruto started moving as well, matching her bounces with a thrust and meeting her in the middle. She felt so goddamn good, her virgin folds squeezing him like a vice every time he slid back into her. Jean couldn't believe what was going on. Her stigma was gone, completely removed, and the man who did it, the man she offered herself to as thanks, was making sweet, legitimate love to her. She was in heaven. Never in her life had the organization's warrior number 9 felt so damn good, so damn happy, so damn loved. She threw her head back and squealed, her inner walls clamping down upon her lover's shaft, trying to squeeze the essence from him. The sky turned upside down, she saw stars and a loud hum drowned her ears, as Jean twitched and moaned, gasping for breath. Then, Naruto suddenly picked up the pace, eliciting a startled yelp from the woman. Then she lost all thought, as Naruto started pounding her at a brisk, even pace. Not even a full 10 seconds later, she came, again. This time, her juices splashed all over Naruto's lap, mixing with Refill's, as the most powerful orgasm she'd ever experienced tore through her very soul. Galatea couldn't take it anymore. Seeing this prized stud before her fucking 2 women senseless, right in front of her made her need something, anything to ease the longing she felt. Sliding a hand into her pants, the elite warrior woman dropped to her knees and shamelessly played with herself, masturbating to her colleague riding the object of their mutual desire. Claire, on the other hand, was on the ground. Writhing, twitching, and hopelessly confused as yet another wave of pleasure hit her like a ton of bricks. Orgasm after orgasm racked Jean's freshly tainted body as the man who took her innocence relentlessly pounded the living hell out of her. Every last nerve in her body was ablaze with an overload of euphoria. Every thrust sent shockwaves throughout her body so powerful that Jean was honestly surprised to have not died from sheer pleasure. Then, Naruto's member started to twitch, once more. His balls started to tighten, and his breath went shallow. "Jean," he warned, "if you don't want to risk getting pregnant, hop off right now. I can't hold it." Jean's eyes nearly popped out of her skull. Was it even possible for her to become pregnant? Would she even care if she did? "Go ahead," she whispered longingly. "Go ahead. Let it all out inside me." Naruto's eyes rolled back. Upon hearing that, he lost control completely. Pulling her into a deep, smoldering kiss, Naruto rolled them over so that he was on top and used his embrace as leverage to thrust in deeper. Jean aided in his efforts, locking her ankles behind him and pulling her man as far into her depths as he could reach. The two of them locked eyes, their thrusts, their breathing, hell, even their heartbeats synchronized in that instant. And then, Naruto roared as he slammed into Jean's folds, poking his head past her cervix and flooding her darkest depths with his fresh, dangerously potent batch of baby batter. Jean's silver eyes rolled back, and she went stiff as a board, her orgasmic wail caught in her throat. One last time, her inner walls milked her man for everything he had. Every last drop. If she was going to run the risk of having his bastard, then she'd be damned if she didn't give it her best shot. That thought, the mental image it elicited. That of her holding an adorable baby girl with those cute, little whisker marks, had only intensified her orgasm to inconceivable heights. The poor thing never stood a chance. She passed out right then and there without another word. Coming back down from his high, Naruto couldn't help but let out a hearty, warm chuckle. He had a feeling that woman, in particular, was going to be the death of him, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Deep within said woman's belly millions upon millions of tiny foreign cells swam up to her fallopian tubes with one purpose: to find their other half and mercilessly dogpile it until one of them took root, thereby starting the process of passing down Naruto's genes. It wouldn't be long until they found their target. Naruto groaned uncomfortably, as he gently slid out of the unconscious woman's still fluttering slit. It felt almost painful to withdraw from that one. Naruto panted heavily, then spotted another pair of blondes looking at him with such desperation that he'd never seen in his life. Wait, wasn't that one dead, a minute ago? He wasn't just hearing things, earlier, but still, he could have sworn she'd been impaled. Better talk to her first, see if she needed some medical attention. Oh, she needed some attention, all right. Just not the kind he was thinking. Galatea whimpered wantingly. How was she so desperate for this man? What the hell was going on with her? It hurt. She needed him so badly that it physically hurt. Naruto pulled up his trousers and walked over to this woman so he could get a closer look. While certainly disheveled and sporting a blood-soaked, utterly ruined uniform, there seemed to be no actual injury. Was she capable of regeneration? He kneeled before Galatea, looking at her closely. There was no doubt about it, this was the woman he saw. Despite having no physical injuries, she seemed to be in pain, and reeked of sex. Are you okay? Galatea groaned. 10 orgasms, up until now, she didn't know that was even possible. I need you, she rasped. Please, give me the same attention you gave those two. I don't care if you toss me aside when you're done. I'm desperate. I need you inside me. Watching you have your way with them and not me was torture. Naruto blushed. Are you sure? Yes. Never before had he heard such a longing shout. He simply couldn't help himself, but first, he had to know if she had the same crudely sewn scar as Jean did. He didn't want to hurt her after all. Jean had a nasty looking scar on her chest, Naruto pointed out. I was wondering if that was common among you claymores. I don't want to risk reopening it if that's the case. Galatea scowled. We all have them, she said impatiently. If you're worried about it reopening, there's no need. It looks like a hack job, but it's more than sturdy enough, as Jean proved when you pounded her. I healed it first. Galatea stopped right there. She could tell he wasn't lying. What? Impossible. No one has ever. Look at her yourself, if you don't believe me. She is face up, after all. The blonde, plus Claire, did just that and couldn't believe their eyes. The stigma, it was gone. Let me heal yours up, as well. Then, I'll play with you all you want. I should be the one offering sex to you in exchange for healing it. Hell, I'll be your sex toy until you get bored with me. Naruto chuckled, I don't think I could ever get bored with such a beautiful woman. Now, remove your shirt so I can get to it, please. Poor Galatea was rendered utterly speechless. Did he just call her beautiful? Turning beet red, she nodded and slipped out of her top. Her armor and cape having been long since shed and strewn about, Naruto frowned deeply at seeing the scar. It was a carbon copy of Jean's, all the way down to the smallest detail. Remind me to kill the bastard who did this to you. Despite his earlier achievements, Galatea doubted he could, but appreciated the gesture. Then, she shuddered as she felt the warm touch of Naruto's glowing hand upon her scar. True to his word, it disappeared instantly as he slid his hand down along it. Once he reached down to the last bit near her groin, Galatea then grabbed him by the wrist and slid his hand into her pants. Well. Apparently, she was every bit as eager as she'd claimed. The blonde then grabbed Naruto by his shirt and pulled him into a fiery kiss. While he snaked his other hand around her top to fondle the woman's chest, Galatea undid his pants and extracted her long-awaited prize. Holy shit, it was every bit as huge as it looked earlier. She wasn't just seeing things. How the fuck did he manage to put it inside someone as tiny as Riefel? She kneeled before him and started to service the man who'd rid her of the one thing stopping her from finding a lover, only to become her lover. She meant every last word she'd said. She was his. Stroking the massive pole in her hands, she then put it in her mouth, doing her best to ignore the taste of two other women, as she bobbed her head. Lightly sucking and licking the shaft before her, Galatea quickly realized she needed both hands to stroke him. Naruto moaned happily, as the blonde did her damnedest to please him. Her technique was of an amateur, but he hadn't the heart to tell her so. Instead, he patted her on the head and bucked his hips. Don't be shy, he whispered. You can pick up the pace. Galatea looked at him with a fire in her eyes, before tripling her efforts. Then, she got the crazy idea of trying to let him down her throat. Muscling past her gag reflex, Galatea then slid forward as far as she could. Cradling the massive rod upon her tongue, she then took a deep breath, opened wide and swallowed his head. Naruto groaned, putting his hands at the back of her head, before pulling her face to his crotch. Then, he started bucking, again. Using her throat as a sex toy, Galatea did her best to stay put. It wasn't easy in the slightest, feeling his massive shaft scraping against her esophagus, but she held on like a trooper. Naruto, meanwhile, was having the time of his life. Her throat felt so damn good. It was so warm, wet, and tight. How long had it been since he was last able to do this? He'd honestly lost track. That it didn't take long, though, for Galatea to need some air, so she withdrew, gasping like a fish out of water, but still pleasuring her new lover. Then, she let him back in. Naruto couldn't help himself. He petted her with one hand and used her hair as a handlebar with the other, sliding in and out of her throat with added vigor. One more time, she needed to withdraw for air. Again, still stroking him. Then, Naruto enjoyed the feel of her throat one last time, before unleashing a fresh, hot load directly into her stomach with a grunt. Then, he pulled out and splashed the rest on her face and tits. As she fell back, then, the man before her leaned over Galatea and urged her to let him take off her pants. She blushed, but obliged, lifting her rear. Then, Naruto lifted her left leg and slowly slid his still hard monster dong right into her womanly folds. Galatea wailed at the pain and pleasure of her man parting her lower regions, penetrating deeper than she ever could have hoped to with her fingers. Then, he stopped against her cervix, before putting her leg on his shoulder, grabbing her shoulder, and starting to move, to fuck her sideways, as he played with her clitoris. Faring no better than Refull, the poor woman, came almost the very instant he started, shrieking her orgasm to the heavens. The blonde squeezed his shaft nearly just as hard as Jean. Was she a virgin, too? Even if she wasn't, this woman was so delightfully tight. It was awesome, Naruto panted and moaned as he picked up the pace. Poor Galatea could only sit still and wait for him to finish, screaming and wailing as he has his way with her. Then, the man felt a pair of hands wrap around him from behind. Claire just couldn't take it anymore. Her pants lay abandoned and sopping wet. Her shirt and what was left of her boots also discarded. She was as naked as the day she was born, whispering all manner of naughty things into his ear. When you're done with her, I want you to bend me over like a bitch and fuck every hole I have until you have nothing left, she told him. I don't care if you have to keep going after I've passed out. I don't care if you get me pregnant. I don't care how many times you have to get off. Fuck her into the ground like the rest and fuck me into oblivion. Naruto couldn't help himself. Despite having gotten off not too long ago, the things she said. The mental images she gave. The pleasure he already felt from banging a smoking hottie, while another was pressed up against his back and begging for his dick, it all added up too quickly. Without warning, Naruto let out a grunt as he blew his fourth load. Not one drop smaller than the last two, it caught Galatea so off guard that she nearly fainted on the spot. Spurt after massive spurt flooded the blonde's folds, coating her inner walls in a thick, pearly white. Thankfully, Galatea had already permitted him to do as he damn well pleased. Elsewise, he would have panicked. Said woman collapsed in a glassy dead-eyed heap, slowly drifting into unconsciousness, as Naruto pulled out that he then turned to Claire and gave her a devilish grin, before setting his hand aglow and dealing with her stigma. Once he was done, he playfully grabbed the girl by the hair and tossed her onto her hands and knees. Then, he loomed up behind her and poked his head into her folds. Placing a hand on her hip, Naruto then pushed in. While not a virgin for tragic reasons, she was still not accustomed to such a massive tool entering her folds. But, none of that stops her from wanting some. Claire's eyes rolled back as she was stretched to the brink. It was delicious. Every fiber of her being screamed for more. Then, Naruto spanked her right on the rear and grunted as she clenched impossibly tight around his shaft. Placing both hands on her ass, he then started to move within her. Naruto groaned when Claire moved with him, pulling forward while he pulled back, and pushing back while he pushed forward. He took it slow at first, so she could get used to his girth. After a while, she let out a pleading whimper and Naruto took that as the go-ahead to move faster. So that's what he did. He slammed against her cervix as hard and fast as he could. Using her hips as a handle, Naruto pushed himself as deep into her velvety cavern as he possibly can. And Claire enjoyed it. She was squealing her pleasure out like a little whore. The silver-eyed woman looked over her shoulder at her lover and gave him bedroom eyes, complete with her sexually licking her lips. Naruto was surprised when Claire pushed herself up without warning and used her momentum to send him down on his ass. She didn't stop there though. Claire put an arm behind his head and pulled him into a lip lock. At the same time, she shook and ground her vagina on his prick. Naruto returned the kiss with gusto, taking the opportunity to play with her tits. Claire moaned into the kiss as her lover played with her mounds, kneading them like dough. Then, she squealed as he pinched and rubbed her nipples while picking up the pace of his thrusts. The kiss deepened, their tongues clashing for dominance, and the sound of their pounding loins echoed off the trees and castle. Naruto started to twitch inside his newest woman. He was so close. Claire looked him in the eye, a string of saliva connected them as she withdrew. She blushed, knowing he was about to come. And she wanted it. She wanted him to knock her up like a little whore. Go ahead, she whispered longingly, pour every last drop you have left inside me. It was hard to talk, as she quickly found herself out of breath, but she pressed on, looking to get her man off more quickly. I already told you I don't care if you get me pregnant, if that's even possible. Hell, I hope it is. I hope you do. Don't stop until you're satisfied. Please. Upon hearing that last word, the sheer lust it contained, Naruto was pushed over the edge. He grabbed this woman he was fucking by the hips and slammed as deep as he could go with a vicious roar. Claire immediately lost all strength in her body as her world spiraled before her eyes. A mighty wave of euphoria slammed into her with paralyzing force. As Claire was stunned by the mind-numbing pleasure that racked the blonde to her very core, Naruto wrapped his arms around her torso and gently placed his newest mate upon the ground. Now writhing atop her, the impossibly endowed foreigner poured wave after molten wave of fresh potent seed deep within this woman of his. Both hands on her rear, Naruto pulled Claire close, pressing against her cervix, as he continued to his inhumanly copious load directly into her uterus. His shaft throbbed, his balls visibly contracted, and his whole body twitched as the blonde actively attempted to knock this woman up like the bitch she secretly, shamefully longed to be. Catching himself on his hands so he didn't accidentally hurt Claire, Naruto gasped for breath. Holy shit, that took a lot out of him. His still twitching member only continued pumping spurt after spurt into Claire, boggling his mind. How the man still had anything left in him was anyone's guess. Meanwhile, off in the distance, short-haired blonde fidgeted uncomfortably. She had a nasty gash where her left eye once was and similar armor to Galatea. Her sabatons were of a slightly different design, though, and the crest on her leather choker was of another symbol. This symbol was also engraved upon her sword, which was tucked away within the right slot of her backplate. Rafaela. The woman, apparently named Rafaela, jolted out of her stupor. Yes. What happened? The question came from an irate man in black. He was garbed in a suit, wide-brimmed hat, and sunglasses. I've been trying to get your attention for half an hour. Try as she might, Rafaela couldn't help the blush off of her face. Something odd, was her answer. I'm having trouble piecing it together. It was very distracting, as well. First, there was a massive surge of yoki. No, it felt similar to yoki, but different in some way. More natural. More pure, perhaps. It was odd. Then, there was an explosion followed by a brief, but a powerful earthquake, and the second biggest yoki signature vanished. Doff, if the reports of him being the consort of this abyssal were correct, that it wasn't a minute later, and the abyssal one became docile. With the runaway, the eye of the organization and the captured hybrid quickly following suit. Yes, docile was a more favorable way to put it. Rafaela found the more accurate term far too embarrassing to even think, let alone utter. Something has happened to the runaway, as well as Galatea, Jean, and the abyssal one of the West. There's one other among them, but they're an anomaly. An anomaly, a pause, and a curious frown, explain. The yoki they're using is more natural. Pure, maybe. It is hard to describe, but, unlike anything I've sensed before. Instead of pulsating, it flows like water. Very strange. Visibly befuddled, Rafaela couldn't describe it better than that. The man, Rubel, scowled. That didn't sound comforting. What happened? Did this other person have anything to do with it? Indeed, the woman confirmed. They killed the abyssal one's rumored consort. Then, she approached them, and Rafaela trailed off, blushing heavily. And now, he was getting impatient. Out with it. She fornicated with them, the blonde muttered uncomfortably. Then, Jean did the same, followed by Galatea, and now, the runaway. Rubel could practically see steam rising from Rafaela's head, as her blush intensified. Are they still going at it? The anomaly is. The women have all been rendered unconscious, but this new party is having their way with the runaway, as we speak. Face down, ass up, and covered in white, poor Claire was out cold with a silly grin on her face. Still, the only chick wearing anything at all, still Rifle lay face. Up. Naruto's essence leaking out of her thoroughly stuffed, little Kuch, Jean mumbled in her sleep, dreaming of a happy life with Naruto. Unlike the rest, she was in for quite the surprise in a couple of weeks. Finally, Galatea, like Claire, was grinned like a lunatic. Having been fucked so thoroughly stupid, her euphoric expression still had yet to fade. As for Naruto, he was plopped in the middle of his little harem, his monster cock having finally deflated after 3 literally fucking hours of having his way with Claire. That poor girl wasn't walking out of here when she woke up. Are you done yet? You haven't taken this long to finish up since getting dogpiled in Wave. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin at the Kyuubi's shout. To be fair, I hadn't gotten some in over a year. Cut me some slack, eh? Damn, he hated leaving those women behind. That girl, Uchiha, was particularly hard to bid farewell. She was so sweet and adorable. But, seeing how close Wave was to Konoha, he couldn't take any chances. Kyuubi huffed in irritation. Don't let your guard down, kid, someone's coming from the northeast. Another one of these women, from the feel of it, as well as a particularly slimy character. Be on your toes with him. This one reminds me far too much of Orochimaru. Noted, Naruto replied, grunting as he heaved himself off the ground. Then, he made himself look presentable, before whipping out a scroll and unsealing a few blankets. No need for the ladies to be seen in such a state unnecessarily. After covering them up, Naruto looked around for something to do, and after finding a few rocks he decided to do some juggling to pass the time until the people he sensed arrived. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long. From the tree line to his left, Raphaela emerged, sword is drawn just in case. Then, Ruble popped out on her heels, hands in his pockets, as the duo approached cautiously. The one-eyed woman then staggered a bit, overpowered by the smell of sex that permeated the air. Her knees shook, nearly buckling, as her loins felt uncomfortably hot, but she ignored it as best she could. Ruble frowned. This boy was just barely in his late teens, if at all. How he achieved such a feat as this was quite the mystery. Looking about, the man in black eyeballed the 4 women, the scent of semen spent clearly coming from them. Claire, in particular. Quite the mess you've made here, my boy. Would you care to share your name? Ceasing his juggling now that he was being addressed, Naruto looked at the man in black with a deep frown. So that's the slimy man Kurama was talking about. Geez, he really was reminiscent of Orochimaru. His negative emotion sensing was really putting him on edge around this man. Now why would I go and do that, he asked, not impolitely, but there was no way in hell he was going to give this obviously shady man any info on himself. He then added, it doesn't seem like the smart thing to do, to be honest. Ruble frowned slightly in displeasure. Credit where it's due. You're wise for your age. Considering your attempt to gain information was that of an amateur, it wasn't that hard to figure out. Naruto informed the man with an air of indifference. He saw better attempts from different people that tried to get information on him. Despite his irritation, the man in black carried on with an air of professionalism. Sometimes the best way to get information is to take the amateur route. Ruble pointed out. True, admitted the blonde, but it also makes you predictable. Well, this was going nowhere fast. Ruble decided to take another route to get some information. That aside, it is my job, along with hers, to discover what happened here. He gestured to Raphaela. We're also here to fetch Claire and check on Galatea, seeing as how she hadn't reported back. Naruto figured those were the names of the other 2 blondes. And mentally kicked himself for not asking, before pounding them into oblivion. Then Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man. If he's the person that assigns work for them, the blonde reasoned, then he may know the person who made that so-called unhealable scar. You know. He began, his lips thinning, the scars on their torsos. You wouldn't happen to know the person who caused them to do you. That piqued Ruble's interest. Perhaps, he replied. Okay. Good to know, and Naruto left it at that. However, He quickly made a mental note to have a clone transformed to follow this man and find out the identity of the son of a bitch who disfigured them. He looked at Galatea, Jean and Claire for a moment, before addressing the man, "How long before you need them up and ready for duty?" "As you can see, they're a bit out of commission at the moment." "As soon as possible. But considering the circumstances, they can rest a while." Rubel would have normally said they'd have to be ready for duty immediately, but if Raffaella was right about what she sensed, then he was in the presence of a being who'd killed the rumored consort of Riefel. Someone even the single digits would have trouble with. There was no need to risk pissing such an entity off, yes. "All right. You may want to leave for a bit. While I am confident that I can subdue her," he pointed at the slumbering Riefel, "I'm not sure I can protect you two at the same time." This was a complete and utter lie, of course, but they didn't have to know that. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.